Wakey, wakey, everybody. Oh my God. How's everyone doing? Now I see you're talking about it's impossible to see when you're up here. So yeah, I'm gonna be giving a quick talk. Phil asked me to speak at this event, and I was like, what am I even gonna talk about? And he seemed to think that I had some interesting things to say. So I whipped together this presentation here for you, and I hope you'll find it interesting. I would love it to be interactive. So throughout, if you like, just yell stuff up. You don't put a hand up or anything because I won't see it, but you can just yell stuff like that. Exactly. That was great. So let's get going. I'm going to talk about some tips that I've kind of put together just from working with clients. So my background, before ever really calling myself like a photographer, I worked in an agency, but I worked on the account side. So that basically means I would be like in charge of the accounts, dealing with the clients, dealing with budgets, all the things that are not creative at all. And I honestly hated it, but I was apparently good at it. So they would promote me, and career was going pretty good, but I was like, I can't do this. So I want to be more creative and have more creative opportunities and shoot more. So I created this place called Astrolab Studios. So if you're not familiar, Astrolab is essentially a film and photography studio. We're located in the east end of the city, around Eastern and Carlaw. And we host a variety of things, mainly commercials and music videos, I would say, are like the bread and butter for us. But we get a whole random bunch of stuff. The one thing you see on the screen there is actually from the TV show The Boys. That's a scene that they did where they recreated like solid gold. So I created this place called Astrolab for a number of reasons, but the main one was just more creative opportunities. And so anyway, fast forward to here, that we are about 5 years later. It's been open now, and I've gotten to do some interesting shoots myself, host a ton of cool shoots. I obviously didn't shoot anything to do with this one here, but we get to host all kinds of cool stuff. And so I've gleaned some interesting tips, I guess, along the way. And I have them written down, so I'm just going to keep this handy here. So the first thing I want to tell you is that I'm not creative. Like, this was my whole life. I grew up, and until very recently, if you were to ask me if I was creative, the answer would be no. I'm definitely not creative. Never saw myself as a creative person. It was really other people kind of telling me that they thought I was creative and that the work I was doing was creative, was when I finally was like, maybe I am creative. And I realized it's like anyone can be creative. I think anyone is creative and everyone isn't creative. It's really kind of up to them whether or not they are going to be creative. You're not born creative, right? And I think a lot of it comes down to, let me just see here. So it's kind of like it's really two things, I think, that determine whether or not you're creative. And the first thing, and this is very simple, is just believing that you're creative. Just believing it, that's it. Like, dead simply, if you believe you are creative, you're already halfway there. The second thing that you need in order to be creative is just to create. And that could be anything. In the context of this room, it's probably imagery. But maybe it's like crocheting or, I don't know, scribbling on napkins or making origami. Whatever it might be, if you create anything, then you are creative. Like, whether you see it as creative or not, you may think, oh, it's just an origami thing. Someone else will see that thing and go, holy shit, you made that? That's creative, right? So just a little quick tidbit there about creativity in general, because I think it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and a lot of people probably don't necessarily see themselves as creative, who probably actually are. Okay, so getting into the tips. So this is now you're working with somebody, they've paid you, they've hired you to shoot this thing for them. So you want it to be successful, right? At the end of the day, you want to like the work. I think that's probably the most important thing for you as a photographer. But you also want the client to like the work. That's important. Like, nothing sucks more than thinking that it was so great to only find out in the end that they hate the work and they don't want to use it. So some tips for avoiding that heartache. The first one is just to sort of align on the idea and sort of to collaborate with your client. Make them part of the idea process and coming up with what it is that you're going to be shooting. Sorry, I know I'm walking around weird. It's really awkward to like look out into darkness and not see people while I'm trying to talk. So I apologize for that. But this is super important because if you and the client are both on the same page as far as like, what is it that we actually are trying to accomplish here? What should the images look like? If we pull up the final image, what is it going to look like, and we're going to say that's what we're happy with that image. What does that look like? So if you can align on that long before you ever step into a studio or go out on a location and shoot, then already you're probably going to be setting yourself up for some success. So that's the first thing. And now just a simple look at in this example. So here was with a client. They said to me, the client verbally expressed to me that he wanted to have this shot where it looked like he was basically standing on top of the clouds. And yeah, that's basically the brief. So a bit of back and forth and discussing, and some very basic drawings, which these are like, I mean, they're stick figures, look. That's a literal stick figure right there. But these drawings gave us enough to say, okay, we both get it. We look at it, we can look each other in the eye and go, do you know what we're shooting? Yeah, we know what we're going to shoot, right? Then on the day, when we start seeing stuff on the monitor, we can very quickly see, are we on the right track or not, right? So that would be the first thing. Sorry, bear with me. I haven't presented in a real long time. A little bit nervous. Forgetting points. Mike just died. Funny timing. Okay, I was like getting out of breath there for a second, so that was a good break. So let me make sure I'm not missing any points here. Oh yes, and then of course, outside of scribbles, you always have your reference photos, which here's just a few. We had a ton of more, but for this shoot, we had a couple different things we were doing. So that sort of cloud image I spoke about is sort of represented on the left, and then we had a couple other different things we were doing with some colored lighting. And again, so we were able to sort of align on ahead of time what exactly it should look like, and then of course on the day there's room for our own creativity to come and play and to not do exactly what was in the reference, but have something that we all got excited about when we saw it on the screen that was, you know, a close representation of that. And so there's one example. So it's an apparel company, as you might have guessed. And there's actually something funny I'll tell you about these images later on. There's a tip or a lesson learned from this that'll be funny a bit later. Okay, so that was my first tip. The next tip is using all of that. So all that work you just put in, you've planned, you've collaborated, you know what the idea is. Now you're just literally compiling that. And I have a very simple one here. I'm going to show you that like I whipped together in like 30 minutes before the shoot. But it was something that on the day is really helpful. Make sure everyone understands what we're doing, when we're doing it, like what outfits, everything, little details, whatever we can include that would keep not just the client on the same page, but also the whole team. And it's really simple stuff. So in this example, we had a couple different sort of setups we were going to do. These just sort of outlined them. They were just very, like, this is really basic stuff, so I hope it's not too basic, but just simple bullet point notes about each different setup of what we were going to do and sort of key things to keep in mind about them. You know, for the shadows, for example, like trying to play with the harsh lines and the shadows was really important. And so just having a note about that, so that on the day when we're shooting, before even start snapping away to kind of look at it and remember, oh yeah, okay, that's what we're trying to do with this. Cool. And then you can really focus on more than like the composition and everything else because you already know exactly what the lighting should look like and it's already there probably. Here's some more from the Bible. Again, just overviewing the looks. This one talked about like, look 2. It got down to like the accessories that it was going to have. Like they're little details, but they matter because on the day you want to make sure you don't miss that. Like if there's like a ring that needed to be worn because some awesome designer provided you with this ring, then it's like you want to make sure that's featured or that's there and you don't forget about it. And then obviously having a schedule for the day is very important. These are just some images from that shoot with Shelly. She's a techno producer and DJ. Okay, another tip is to keep your client sort of creatively engaged throughout. And it's hard to give examples of how to do this. It really depends on the situation, the client, how like comfortable you are with them, how much they really want to be engaged too. Sometimes they just don't really. But most of the time they do, because for most clients, this is not something they do every day. When they get to come out on set and shoot and work with you, this is like a field trip day for them. So to have them, get them involved and get them playing. Nick talked a lot about being playful. I also think that's super, super important. It's always be having fun. And so if you can make it fun and get them having fun, and I don't know, again, how to exactly give you a concrete way of getting your client engaged creatively, but it just comes down to, I think, kind of reading the situation and knowing them. But finding ways, it will make a huge difference because it makes them feel like they're creating this too. Even though you're the one that's, clicking the shutter, they're helping create these images and they're taking ownership so that later on, they're not going to be like, oh, wait, we don't actually like this. They definitely going to like it because they helped create it. So that's important. Let's just see what else here, okay. It's a team sport. Nick talked a lot about this as well. And this is super, super important because so many people, I think, are under the impression that, and some photographers do everything themselves, and they do amazing stuff, whatever. But most of the stuff you see out there, a team put it together. It was not just a single photographer who lit it and did all the wardrobe and did all the props and everything themselves. It just doesn't work that way. The best stuff you see, it's a team behind it. And the best work you're gonna do is when you have a team. So it's first of all just accepting that and being good about that, or being, I guess, okay with it. I think it's awesome, so I personally fully embrace it. But and then the second thing is just finding those people. That's the hard part, I think. But finding people who are passionate about this kind of thing too, but they have their own different things to bring to the table, and collaborating with those people is a really good start. Okay, and then I think this is my last tip. And this one's the one that I mentioned on that rocket shoot, that'd be kind of funny later, is that I actually don't like those images that I showed you. I didn't finish them myself, and they didn't turn out quite how I thought they would based on what we shot. They totally butchered them, but I left them in there because I thought it was an important lesson. And also, I really didn't have the time. I was trying to edit them myself for this presentation to show you, but I just didn't have time. But I thought this was an important lesson, which is to say that I think that you should either finish your own work or, going back to the point about having a team, work with people who can help you finish your photos that you trust. But I would recommend never, ever handing them off to the client. Unless that's the only way they're going to hire you, and that they're adamant that they must, and you're like, okay, I have to do this job, then fine. But it should be in your contract. They do not get your raws ever, because they end up doing. Anyway, I won't get into why I hate these photos, but it's just not how they should look. And one last thing. This is my final tip before we go. Is get approvals as you go, and I've kind of talked about this already throughout the whole pre-pro process, and we talked about collaborating on the idea and making sure everyone's aligned there. So that's all kind of goes into the same point. But this goes also through post as well. And there's an example in here I'll show you. There's a kind of embarrassing email I got, which was, it was just a portraiture client who I worked with. But she basically was, well, I'll just show you the email. Oh, you're not going to be able to read it. Okay, hang on. Can I zoom? I can't. Shit. Maybe you can kind of see? So she thanks me for my work. Let me just see if I can close this. There we go. But after going through them now, she feels that they don't reflect how she looks and comes across like she's gotten plastic surgery, she says. And this could have been really shitty and really bad and could have made me either have to give her my raw photos, which is what she's asking me to do, or go back and spend a shit ton of time redoing all her photos for her. But the beauty was that I had gotten clear approval from her all the way along. Literally for the first few photos I did, I sent her one at a time even just to say hey, what do you think? And I actually didn't touch her face or figure in any way. She mentions plastic surgery. I literally didn't alter her at all. I definitely, the odd blemish, little quick blemish removal. That was it as far as retouching. And what I learned there was just basically that I think she was just trying to get my raws. She had asked me previously about the raw photos, at the very beginning, and I told her, no, you don't get my raws. She asked me again at the end of the shoot about the raws. I said, you don't get the raws. So I'm pretty sure that was just her sort of ploy to try and get them. But the point of the lesson is that get approvals as you go, because if you do, it'll save you in a case like this, or in a case if a client's like, no, I don't want to pay you, you will have a thread, a chain of saying, actually, you approved all of this. This has all been approved as we go. The last thing you want to do is edit a batch of 100 photos, spend weeks retouching, send it all off to find out they don't like them, right? So approvals as you go. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that was my last point.